Hello, YouTube community. It's Berets, and welcome back to my channel, RobScure Music. It is Memorial Day weekend 2022, so I hope you're all staying healthy and enjoying this weekend if you can. And today I wanted to make a video about an album and an artist that has a deep connection to this particular holiday. But before I do that, I just want to quickly go over just 5 facts about Memorial Day. Number 1, the holiday was originally called Decoration Day, and it began in 1868, just a few years after the end of the Civil War. Number 2, the holiday used to be celebrated on May 30th each year, and the Uniform Holiday Act of 1968 not only made this a federal holiday, but effective 1971, it changed the day that we celebrate from May 30th to the last Monday in the month of May. Number 3, on Memorial Day, flags should be flown at half-staff from sunrise until noon, and then quickly raised to the top of the staff and flown until sunset. Number 4, the National Monument Remembrance Act of 2000 set 3:00 p.m. local time as a moment to reflect on the holiday and to silently, if you will, think about those who gave their lives in the wars. And number 5, the poppy, the red flower that you sometimes would see veterans selling outside of maybe a grocery store or at train station or something like that. The poppy became a symbol of tribute to those that died in the war after a Georgia teacher named Moyna Michael read the John McCrae poem called "In Flanders Fields." The poem gives voice to the soldiers that are buried in a field of poppies that John McCrae saw in Flanders, which is the northern part of Belgium. And the teacher read this poem and started pushing, and I think she wrote an article in a magazine, and she began sort of pushing the poppy as being sort of the national symbol, if you will, a symbol of tribute to the soldiers who gave their lives in the various wars. So now I'd like to talk about a particular album that was released in 1966. And the 60s, of course, the mid-60s, it was a very tumultuous time, a lot of turmoil. The Vietnam War was raging. Americans were being sent to the war, in Vietnam. And back home, there were a lot of anti-war protests. There were a lot of musicians who supported that stance of anti-war sentiment, if you will. Obviously, we had Phil Ochs, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, and many others who sort of took up that cause. And in the middle of all of this, we had one man actually who was a veteran of the Vietnam War, and he was wounded in the war in middle of 1965. He came home and he recorded an album, and that is Staff Sergeant Barry Sadler, and his album is called simply Ballads of the Green Berets. And the title song from this album actually went to #1 on the pop charts and #2 on the country charts at the time. And although this album is now somewhat dated, it's more of a historical artifact, if you will, of the 60s, and somewhat commemorates the Vietnam War and the soldiers who not only fought in the war, but sort of the things that they experienced in the war while they were in Vietnam. And Staff Sergeant Barry Sadler was a Green Beret, and he was actually wounded in the war in the middle of 1965, and it required surgery, and he came home, he recorded this album, and he actually debuted the song Ballad of the Green Beret on the Ed Sullivan Show in February 1966. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the album itself. The songs are basically stories. Quite frankly, he has a somewhat limited vocal ability, but these are story songs, if you will, about experiences that he and others faced, like I said, in Vietnam. The title track has a precise military beat to it, and it tells the story of a soldier who gives the ultimate sacrifice and wishes to pass the torch to his young son. And basically, in the song itself, let me just look for these lyrics. He basically, like I said, he wants to pass the torch of being a soldier in Green Beret to his son. And he says in the song, "Put silver wings on my son's chest. Make him one of America's best. He'll be a man they'll test one day. Have him win the Green Beret." And let me share with you the track listing. And the second song on here is "I'm a Lucky One," and that's really a tale of a soldier who his tour of duty is over, and he's lucky to be coming back home after fighting in the war. Then we have a Letter from Vietnam, and this is basically a story of a soldier writing a letter to his loved one back at home, and obviously, he misses her. He wishes he could be home, and it's sort of telling her about what he's experiencing. And again, I just jotted down a couple of lyrics here. He says in this particular song, Letter from Vietnam, "Last night we had a firefight, machine guns firing tracers through the night. And as we fought, my thoughts, they turned to you. And I knew somehow, darling, I'll come through." And then a little later, he sings, "Even though I'm far away, I'll think of you each day. I'll come home when I can. This letter's postmarked Vietnam." So again, I think anyone who was there can really appreciate these songs in this album. he also has a last song on side one is called Salute to the Nurses. So while the focus here is on soldiers, he sort of, tips his hat to the nurses, the men and women who are often forgotten in time of war, or if not forgotten, at least not particularly thought about as much. And it's very nice that he pays tribute to them in this particular song. Then we have side two. I'm watching the raindrops fall. This is, yet another sort of sad story. Garrett Trooper. Garrett Trooper is a sort of comical song in which he talks about, those soldiers who are never at the front line. Their clothes are always nicely pressed. Their boots are shined. They're not out there getting their hands dirty. They're there to get some honors, perhaps, and sort of the recognition of being at war, but they don't actually want to face the war. And it's actually quite clever. He says, let's see. He's talking about his uniform's basically starched and tidy, but he says. In the song, he says he's fought from Saigon to Natron, in every bar, that is, and only with the girls. And he hasn't won one yet, but he's a trooper, a Garrett Trooper. And he goes on to say, he's got a hip knife, a side knife, a boot knife, a shoulder knife, and a little bitty one that's a combination flare gun, dinner set, and genuine police whistle. But he's a trooper, a Garrett Trooper. So I always enjoy that song a little bit because it's sort of a more light-hearted song in the midst of some of the more heavier emotional songs, if you will. Then there's a song called Lullaby, which is a beautiful lullaby to his 3-year-old son. He's trying to get his son to go to sleep. He's telling him, close your eyes. Daddy needs to go back to the war. And I'm not sure when I'll be back home. But, in the meantime, you'll be, the man of the house, if you will. And it's just very, very sweet song. Trooper's Lament is a song about a paratrooper whose parachute doesn't open. Again, not one of the lucky ones, if you will. Unfortunately, that's the harsh reality, is that many young men will go to war and many will not return. And then the last song on here is called Bambi Ba. And Bambi Ba is essentially a Vietnamese beer. I think it was French Heineken that produced it. And I understand it's not particularly good, but the song is about a soldier who, wakes up, he's in jail, and he's telling his sergeant, I don't remember what happened or how I got here, and he's blaming, Bambi Ba for his situation. So, all in all, very, very patriotic, if you will, album. It sold very well in the 60s. Like I said, it's somewhat dated now, but if you're interested, take a listen. You can certainly find this on YouTube. I imagine you can probably find it on your favorite streaming service as well. One more time, I'll just show you the back. So Staff Sergeant Barry Sadler. And he also, and that was in 1966, he released another album in 66 called The A-Team. And the single, the title track, also did well. I think that was a top 30 hit, as was the album. The album made the top 30 charts. And then in 1967, And I don't have that second album, but I have his third album called Back Home. And this was released in 1967. And this is more of a sort of country and Western sort of vibe to it. It's got some nice songs on it, but you know, it pales in comparison to this. And this one, I remember my older brother had this album and played it, and so I sort of experienced it secondhand. But he was 4 years older and was potentially in line to be drafted. But thankfully that didn't happen. So anyway, that's it. Happy Memorial Day to everyone. And again, stay safe. And remember, if the music strikes a chord, let it play.